Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you here today for our online panel event. I understand that we have attendees dialing in from a wide range of locations across the world. You're all very welcome. I'm grateful we have such a wonderful lineup for the launch of the Circular Buildings Toolkit, and I will introduce you to the panel in a few moments. But first, allow me to say a few words on why we're here today. So 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of the Club of Rome landmark report, The Limits to Growth, as a first to map our planet's interconnected systems and make clear that if growth trends continued unchanged, we would overshoot the carrying capacity of the Earth over the next 100 years. Today, the call for change is more urgent than ever. And buildings are a massive raw material and energy consumer, accounting for about 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions and around 95% of the value of construction material is lost in demolition. But it doesn't have to be this way. A circular economy approach offers a way out and presents us with an enormous business opportunity. At Arup, we're convinced that the only way to achieve a systems change is through partnerships. And our partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a testament to this. Together, our designers and circular economy experts have, for the first time, created a practical toolkit that progresses concrete strategies to help stakeholders working across the building industry to easily embed circular economy principles into their projects and portfolios. It allows us to go beyond energy efficiency, which has been a focus so far, and tackle embodied energy as well. Importantly, the toolkit is free to use, and it's enabling everyone in the market to access and use it. It's important not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because circularity is increasingly embedded in a sustainability policy objective for access to finance, which will be the catalyst for transformation in the building industry. The driving principles for the circular economy are eliminating waste and pollution, circulating materials and products in use, and regenerating natural systems. The Circular Buildings Toolkit enables us to use this knowledge in practice and move to action. And with that, I would like to introduce our two first panelists. I'm really pleased to welcome Andrew Morlet, CEO of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is one of the leading advocates for circular economy across industries and our partner on the Circular Buildings Toolkit. And Christina Gamboa, the CEO of the World Green Building Council, the network that works with businesses and governments to accelerate the decarbonization of the building and construction sector. Welcome both, really pleased to see you. Andrew, can I start with a question to you? As a knowledge partner, Arup and EMF are establishing a common voice to embed circular economy as at the heart of the built environment. How does the Circular Building Toolkit fit into this picture?
Thanks, Ava. And firstly, just to comment on the partnership, we're delighted to be working with Arup and have done now for many years. And the foundation, as people may know, has now for 12 years really developed and promoted the idea of a circular economy, but also worked actively with our partners and network to bring the idea into practice. And we have a network of around 300 companies that we work with very closely, and a broader network globally of around 2,500 companies and organizations. And as we talk about the circular economy and as our network works on bringing it to life through their design of new product service systems, there is a shift occurring. We're starting to see really an alignment around the vision and the direction, but also, really actively bringing it into business strategy and the design of new product service systems. The built environment is obviously a really crucial part of the equation, as you said, and every single one of our partners in our networks live, work and operate within the built environment. They all have a significant real estate and infrastructure footprint. And many of the large companies that we work with make very, very significant investments in their built environment and building real estate. And we think it's really helpful, really important that we bring the circular economy thinking into that space. And the toolkit provides a really focused way of doing that. And it really does two things. It talks about, the what is a circular economy? Generally, what is it in the built environment and in real estate? And more importantly, perhaps it talks about the how, how we actually take these principles into practice and can apply them in the design and development of real estate and built environment infrastructure and footprints. So we're very delighted to have the toolkit now in place. It is a really very important part of our promotion of design thinking and design into the circular economy. It really does apply the principles very clearly and directly, but also provides practical help and really many examples of how it is and has been applied.
Thank you. Yes, and in the built environment, the circular economy has so far often been regarded as a theoretical framework with little guidance on how it can be operationalized. Christina, do you think the market is ready to embrace a change?
I think so, because we've come to a moment of realization of awareness. But beyond the awareness, there's also regulatory change. So the building and construction sector has many outdated practices, and not embracing circularity is one of them. So we need to see by 2030, we know to meet any sort of goals, to really tackle the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, pollution. We need to have embrace efficient use of natural resources within the built environment, because the time is now to design out, if you like, to design waste out of the construction value chain and the sector's reliance on the consumption of finite resource. So I was saying the sector, Eva, I think is ready for change because they're hungry for knowledge to apply. Sometimes I think the biggest gap is knowledge gap. And this initiative is going to the heart of that, very practical advice how to embrace. And also the sector, which tends sometimes to be very conservative, also, let's say, takes a step forward when policymakers are signaling that they're addressing the topic in terms of enabling the sector to shift towards that clean, circular economy that will help us restore biodiversity and address pollution. So I guess those two signals, there is leaders within the movement wanting to do what's better, which is also good for business and creating social value. And also you have, let's say, the regulatory change in the horizon that is getting stronger and stronger in terms of how it understands a problem and how it knows what levers can it help for the sector to truly transform and embrace another form of defining success in the built environment in terms of addressing the quality of life we all deserve and need.
Yeah, so you really see a change where we're moving from ambition to action now. And that's, and there are some key challenges that the industry faces, of course, in doing that. Andrew, what can we do else in addition to what we talked about already in order to move the dial?
Well, I think we now have this toolkit, for example, and we have the networks of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which I've talked about. The network that Arup has is also very significant. The people on this call as well have ecosystems and networks that are also very significant. And I think one of the biggest things we need to do is to really consistently promote the idea of a circular economy in terms of its principles, the vision that we have, recognize that it is a journey, but really equip the networks, the ecosystems with both the vision and the tools to start to really explore how to bring this to life. And I think the other thing is, we need to recognize it not only, as you said, as the right thing to do, but very much as an economic opportunity. What we have to do is look at the microeconomics. We need to look across our ecosystems and value chains, collaborate in different ways, look at some of the business case barriers and work out how to actually address these. And some of that will be policy, but some of it is really just a change in mindset and a reassessment of, the value of the built environment and real estate in the longer term. So not just thinking about the initial set up and build, but also how it fits in the longer term. So these are things that we need to look at, mindset and economics.
Yeah, and you also talked about using the networks we are in and leveraging the networks. And Christina, you earlier talked about knowledge sharing. How do we encourage more partnerships and more collective action in the industry?
I think the step in the right direction is actually what Arup is doing here today with Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's kind of being generous and open about years of knowledge to put it open to the public. And also, I guess, to continue to build bridges of collaboration instead of competition. There's so much to be done. And actually, the circular economy will be the first step for us to really unlock the built environment to play a regenerative role in addressing biodiversity, and that we have prosperity with nature, not without it, because without it we won't. And I guess so. From my position and my very privileged position, which I take with a lot of pride, is representing a movement that is present in over 70 countries, that has 36,000 companies behind it, understanding the different diversity of regional realities, right, and the different things that business people, and public servants face to drive this forward. So I guess from my side, it's also how to continue to connect the dots, be that a servant leader, if you like, serve the cause, continue to make space for everyone to have a leadership role, and make sure that the knowledge, not information, I think we're beyond information. Information has not unlocked the circular economy, that the true deep knowledge in this complex area of sustainability, I'm not gonna play it down, it has been complex to address, but it's the knowledge sharing will build on the awareness we have, one. Second, will make people act as we flag to them what can they do and what is good also for business, people, and planet. And third, of course, to make sure that we continue to make, let's say, strides in connecting the dots for policymakers, and also going into the let's say, low-hanging fruits of wins that cities also can do in procurement, national governments in terms of addressing waste and pollution. So I think those sorts of big partnerships, levers, and everyone playing its part with generosity in the opportunity and the case studies and the inspiration is what's going to accelerate this to another stage, and that we really get momentum behind everything you guys have researched and put forward in your great work.
Yeah, thank you both. I really like the call to leverage our networks and the generosity, be generous with our knowledge and share that openly and widely. Really like that. Thank you, both of you. Thanks very much, Andrea and Christina. So now please allow me to introduce Martin Pauli, who leads Arup Foresight across Europe. And he will introduce the Circular Buildings Toolkit now, providing an overview of its capabilities. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Eva. And next slide, please. So as mentioned, Arup and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have joined forces really to kind of contextualize the principles of the circular economy for the building industry. Arup has obviously contributed its knowledge about the industry itself, about supply chains and all the stakeholders. And the EMF have contributed their knowledge about systems and the systemic change that is needed. Next slide. When we started this journey to develop the Circular Buildings Toolkit, there have been, we defined 3 objectives, basically. First one was to come up with something that is really kind of technical and detailed and tangible, but practical at the same time. So we also asked our own architects, for instance, and they said, please don't come up with another checklist, make it fun. The second objective was to make sure that we are aligned with the external policy context that Christina also mentioned. We are talking about the taxonomy, we are talking about the levels framework at EU level. So we really wanted to make sure to come up with a toolkit that complies with all that. And the third component was to create a framework for innovation and positive impact. So something that is really fun to embrace and that encourages stakeholders across the value chain to really look at the toolkit and use it and apply it in the real world. Next slide, please. If we put that into the current context, obviously we have achieved quite a lot. We've moved from conventional building design to green design, which is best practice today. We have focused a lot on energy efficiency in the past. However, if we want to achieve the 2030 and 2050 targets that have been agreed in Paris, we need to do a step change. Incremental steps won't help. So we need to embrace new design paradigms, restorative and regenerative designs. And we believe that the circular economy framework and the circular design framework that we will introduce in the toolkit is an ideal foundation for that, because we need to leave the era where building design is still harming ecological systems and creating external cost, towards an era that is basically kind of acting and designing and operating within the planetary boundaries, where we can achieve ecological gains. Next slide. Andrew mentioned already there's also an economic case. I'm not going to go into detail here, but we see that more and more stakeholders across the value chain embrace the principles of the circular economy to achieve broad variety of outcomes. Some of them want to kind of mitigate their risks, policy risk, for instance. Some of them want to create a higher return on the capital, making the operations greener, and others really take that as a framework for growth, innovate their products, their construction products, their materials, and also their business models, which is obviously a key enabler to make that transition. Next slide. So looking at the toolkit a bit closer, again, as Eva mentioned, it's going to be freely accessible to anyone from today. You can access that platform, and it has 3 key components. First of all is Learn, where you can kind of really engage with the detailed principles, strategies, and actions that will help you to make your project, your building, your asset circular. Second component is you can engage with the toolkit with all its resources. You can download templates, workshop materials. So you can really kind of take all those resources to your organization, to your context, and apply it in your specific project or organizational context. And the third component is you can act, you can register, and you can upload your project and kind of really start that journey using the toolkit that will kind of guide you practically through that. Next slide, please. At the heart of the toolkit is our design framework. At the highest level, it has 4 dimensions: build nothing, build for long-term value, build efficiently, and build with the right materials. And we believe that priority enables the impact that we need to make. So it's worthwhile following that. And every dimension has then a set of very detailed strategies and actions that you can click on, that you can play with, and that you can kind of learn about, depending on your specific function in the organization. If you're an architect or if you're an asset manager, you will find the specific content that kind of fits to your function. Next slide, please. At the heart, there are practical guidelines and metrics. So we carried out a very detailed review of policy, of standards, of design practices, and that has been cast into a set of strategies that you can kind of use, and you can also see and understand what impact that strategy might unfold in your specific project context. And you can also kind of take those strategy cards as discussed to your organization, to your project team, to use it on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. Obviously, there are more components to it, and we believe the toolkit will also grow over time. There's a fantastic case study library that will also grow, that pretty much creates trust that this is all already translated into reality. We communicate best practices so that all stakeholders understand that there are solutions out there. There are products and systems they can already use. There's also a tools directory. We understand that on your project journey, you will need a large variety of tools that support further decision making, and the toolkit helps you to identify and prioritize those, and also links to them. Next slide, which is already the last slide. So it's time to act as discussed. Start, register your project, create an account, add your project, and start your project journey today. And with that, I hand over to Eva again.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for that overview. And now I do really look forward to hearing from our industry experts. And I'm delighted to welcome Pernille Berg, who is the Science Director at Copenhagen's Blocks Hub, a Nordic hub for sustainable urbanization. And then Adam Elman, the Head of Sustainability for Google in Europe, Middle East and Africa. He's a leading sustainability expert for blue chip, including Amazon, Marks and Spencer's, among others. Philip Horn, who leads the newly set up Circular Economy division in the European Investment Bank, the world's largest multilateral lender and quite literally the lending arm of the European Union. And last but not least, Paul King, Lend-Lease's Managing Director for Sustainability and Social Impact in Europe, a long-standing sustainability thought leader in the real estate industry. So warm welcome to you all. Paul, may I start with you? There's focus on climate action over the past years, as we know, and we see a much higher level of awareness on how circular economy can help to reduce embodied carbon and actually create a more resilient built environment. How is the real estate industry preparing for this change?
Thank you, Eva. Yes, I mean, we've obviously seen an evolution of the sustainability agenda for the property industry and the wider built environment industry over the last, 15, 20 years, some going much further back than that. I think one of the things that sometimes we've been guilty of is thinking about aspects of sustainability in different silos. So we think about climate action, we think about health and well-being, we think about biodiversity, and we think about circularity, as though somehow these are different things. But of course, we all know in the context of sustainability that all of these things are actually interconnected. And that's the way that we need to think of the world. And I think one of the most dramatic consequences of events of the last couple of years, and I'm thinking particularly here of the pandemic, is it's made us all stop and think differently. It's made us think about what are the kind of places that we want to create, that we need to create, that are going to be fit for purpose in the future. And that means fit for purpose in terms of people's health and well-being in the context of potential future pandemics and so on, but also obviously in order to address some of the inevitable consequences of climate change, even if we do our best to mitigate the worst effects. So you know, we've started to think about how do we create places that are truly fit for the future, and people have started to realize that actually fundamental change is possible. You know, we've seen our lives and the way that we do things change in ways that we couldn't have conceived of 2 years ago on the back of the pandemic. Now, last year in the run-up to COP26, we saw some great motivation of the built environment sector, not least by the World Green Building Council and others, in terms of motivating participation. We saw many, many more companies sign up to the UN's Race to Zero. We've seen many more companies set targets for net zero. But if I'm going to be a bit challenging, it's to say, clearly we need to go beyond net zero. You know, some of us are learning that you can relatively easily begin to address your scope 1 and 2 emissions. You can switch to 100% renewable electricity. You can begin to eliminate fossil fuels on your building sites and so on. The really big challenge is our scope 3 emissions, and largely that's the embodied carbon in the materials that we use in our buildings. That makes up for Lend-Lease about 90% of our carbon footprint. You know, and that is the thing that we've got to tackle in fundamentally different ways. We've got to fundamentally rethink the way that we design buildings, maximizing the use of inherently low carbon materials and recycled materials. We've got to design buildings in such a way that they're designed to be assembled, but also disassembled for reuse in order to eradicate waste. Because only if we do those things will we get close to our target of eliminating carbon emissions completely from our buildings, in Lend-Lease's case, by 2040. We've said we're going to be absolute zero carbon, scope 1, 2 and 3 by 2040 with no offsets and no excuses. That means we have to fundamentally rethink the way we design and manufacture our buildings, and that's got to be based on circular principles.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And in that context, finance is a key driver as well. So the access to finance is a fundamental driver in the real estate industry. And the EU has implemented a number of policies to redirect money flows for greening the economy. Philip, how do you think the toolkit can help investors respond to those policies and the wider agenda that Paul just talked about?
Thank you for this question, Eva. And in order to respond in one sense, I think the toolkit can provide a very, very sustainable support to that. But let me explain this aspect from the point of view of a financing institution. The EIB, as the EU Climate Bank, is committed to Europe's decarbonization targets, objectives, and we have adopted our Climate Bank roadmap. In order to achieve the climate goals, we need to go to a circular economy. And therefore, we are committed to financing much more circular economy projects across all sectors. And by the way, we also provide a lot of dedicated support, technical assistance, guides and initiatives, which can be looked up on our EIB Circular Economy webpage. But other IFIs and also commercial banks have already or will very soon follow the EIB in committing to Europe's decarbonization objectives and targets, and thus also the support of the circular economy. Also note that the taxonomy for sustainable financing is under its way, which is another indication of the importance of circularity in, amongst others, the construction sector. So this means that very soon any bank will look into circularity of finance projects, and bank will request evidence for the circularity in order to avoid greenwashing. So in the view that construction projects need some development time, frequently years, I can only recommend to any construction project under preparation today or to be launched very soon to consider the aspect of circularity in design and construction. And this, of course, where the presented toolkit can provide a significant added value in order to facilitate the access to finance in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. And I think we do see the effect of those policies already in the market, but it will only accelerate, as you say. Adam, can I ask you how digital tools play an essential role in the transformation of the built environment to sustainable outcomes, and how are you leveraging technology as an enabler?
Thanks, Ava, and thanks for inviting me to take part in this panel, and thank you to Arup and EMF for the toolkit. I think we're all on a learning journey, so the more we can do to share guidance and best practices is helpful for everyone. I think everyone here is, very aware of the climate crisis and the need to act urgently. And as we've heard, moving from linear to circular is a key enabler in making that happen. In fact, we won't reach net zero targets without that shift. Particularly in the built environment, which I think many will know is such a key part of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Sustainability and circularity has been key to Google really since inception. There's a story of co-founder Larry Page many years ago walking through the office with a particle counter, really checking air quality and challenging colleagues about the materials used in our building. So it's something that we've been very aware of and focused on for a long time. We really look at the topic in three ways. We look at our own operations, how we can support partners, whether that's government, cities, enterprise customers, we work with NGOs, and then how we enable everyone. And we really do see technology as a key part in both the shift from linear to circular and sustainability more broadly. We as a business, as I say, have been focused on this for many years. In 2007, we went carbon neutral. 2017, since then, we've been using 100% renewable electricity. And we now have a moonshot goal for net zero by 2030 and using 100% carbon-free energy 24/7. And as I say, technology we really do see as a key enabler in there. And actually that was backed up by one of the recent IPCC reports, which really said we have the tools and the technology already, we just need to use them. So just to give you some examples about how we're using technology at Google, and in many cases we're then sharing both the technology and our learnings with others. So like many, we use building information modeling to help design, plan and construct our buildings. Our King's Cross 6 St Pancras Square building is one where BIM was used very heavily. And that building actually received the first net zero building certification last year. It was only really using that BIM technology that helped us to achieve that status. But we're also very much focused on designing and developing a sort of building operating system, really a smart building technology, digital buildings. And that's enabling us to really use connected data, connected devices right across our buildings, right across our portfolio, to get a real central view of all of the energy, all of the capacity and of movements in our building, and really using that data to help us drive energy efficiency, move towards net zero, look at building occupancy, and as I say, think about how we can reconfigure and be flexible in our buildings. And we really do see data as really key here. And this is also where we see advanced technologies like AI and machine learning come into play. So as one example, working with DeepMind, which is a Google company or an Alphabet company, a number of years ago, they used AI technology, specifically neural networks, to capture thousands of data points within our data centers. All of that information from those sensors and data points was sent through to an AI-powered efficiency recommendation system. And that enabled us to identify a 30% saving in the energy efficiency for our cooling systems. And again, we're making that technology available. So really using the data and AI to help spot these trends in data and come up with recommendations to how we can drive improvements. And the last example I'll give is a more practical example in terms of operating buildings. At Google, in a normal non-COVID life, we feed thousands of people in our cafes and restaurants every day. Food waste is a big issue globally and something that we've been very focused on. And we've been using technology in our kitchens and in our cafes to help chefs understand where food waste is being created, how much food waste is being created. They're able then to take that information, amend how they're cooking, amend their recipes and what have you. And that's enabled us to save many thousands of tons of food waste. And again, we continue to use these technologies to really help, as I say, understand what the data is telling us to take action.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Adam. It's about how we can make best use of what we have and use it in a most efficient way. And without technology, we won't be able to use buildings as material banks, which ultimately we want to do. So we need to be able to identify the material and then reuse it later. So great, that's a really interesting insight, Adam. Thank you. Pernilla, revenue generation is essential to help mainstream business transition, that's clear. But what are some of the other drivers for change to circular economy?
That's a very, very nice question, Eva, and thank you very much for having me here today. I think there are so many things that have already been said that are essential for driving the change. Part of it is, I would say, apart from the mindset, and as Christina has said, the knowledge, we also know psychologically that we need to facilitate the sense of empowerment to ensure that we can think across systems. I have the honor every day of curating a network focusing on the circularity within the built environment, where I collaborate with 16 industrial research projects and the supervisors pertaining to those projects, and on top of that, 2 large-scale innovation projects in the Danish term called Grand Solutions, where we have research institutions and businesses collaborate in ensuring the latest research knowledge that can be scaled in an international setting. What is quite clear in terms of the systemic change that is needed, that it's not only the mindset and knowledge, but it's also the partnerships that you have already put on the agenda today in terms of the network. What can we do together across systems? And I think I had the honor of having Martin with me last year, where we looked at the risk aversion within the built environment. And I think the circular economy and the transition that we are embarking on is addressing the ways in which we need to change the risk aversion. I had the last week collaborating with some of these amazing people in the network, where we focused on exactly how can we explain the current potential kind of, we can say, slow pace of change within the built environment. What are the barriers for the transition? What are required? And as one person said, that the built environment, the industry has been characterized as focusing on various types of innovation. The current focus on scarcity of resources, the need for systemic change because of the sense of urgency when it comes to the climate change, is actually bringing us together and actually reducing that risk aversion. And I think that is one of the things that I bring to the table today, that I think people are coming together across the silos to actually want to collaborate and ensure a systemic change. We have the resources, we have the knowledge, and what we've seen, just following up on what Adam is saying, learning from the current pandemic, is that when we have the will to change, we will actually change. So I would just tap back to Christina's point, that the need here is also to ensure that it is human within nature, collaborating with nature, so that we have a future for the future generations and for ourselves. So the regenerative aspects is so important, and that's why I think this toolkit can really assist us in the transition.
Thank you, Pernilla. That's really interesting. Maybe one last question to all of you. The circular economy advocates for building to be used in a more optimized way, as Adam said earlier, and design them with a more flexible approach so that they can be used in a variety of ways and different usages. What innovative approaches do we see as a result of that?
Could I just come in, Eva? And
please.
And because I also just wanted to quickly build on Pernilla's last point about collaboration. You know, it's a strange paradox in our industry that it relies on a huge amount of collaboration between lots of different people and lots of different types of expertise. And yet in other ways, it can be very transactional. And sometimes the collaboration isn't felt in the way that it needs to be. And I think one of the things that we have got to really look at is going forward. You know, we can design buildings with the best of intentions in terms of the choice of materials, the way they're designed for disassembly and reuse and so on. But we have to think about what's going to happen to that building in terms of ownership and stewardship, you know, in 30 years time or 50 years time. You know, there'll be a different set of people responsible for that building then. So how do we steward the principles of circularity over the life of our built environment to make sure that actually that use is optimized? You know, I think we need to reflect that in the kind of contracts that we create, in the kind of policy that we create, the incentives, the fiscal incentives and disincentives that are put in place. I do think we need to think about that, how we steward and how we encourage that ongoing collaboration and the sort of commitment to the original intention of circular design. To answer your question just quickly, we are seeing, at least we typically work on large projects over a long period of time. So it's very common for us to work for 20, even 30 years on a project. And even over the course, therefore, of when a project is live, we might actually anticipate the changes in use of buildings. So one of the things we're finding increasingly useful is the way in which we create meanwhile uses, temporary uses, that help inform us about what people actually want and actually need. And sometimes what we're finding is that some of those meanwhile temporary uses become permanent uses, or indeed other uses that we thought were going to be needed turn out not to be needed, and so we can change our design. We're also seeing already the repurposing and redesigning of buildings. So, for example, on our Mind project, Innovation District on the former World Expo site in Milan, some of the buildings there that were put up very much as temporary structures for the World Expo have actually been reimagined and repurposed into office buildings and so on. So we're already seeing fundamental recycling, reuse, and the evolution of those sorts of buildings.
Yeah, and that needs to be enabled by technology and data, as Adam said earlier. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Does anyone want to come in on what's been said so far? About Adam?
Hi, yes, I guess just building on those points as well. And you know, if you know, flexibility and adaptability is certainly something in the built environment which has become even more of a focus given COVID and particularly thinking about sort of use of office space. One of the sort of practical ways we've been looking at this is building adaptable meeting pods effectively. So made of timber, really designed to still give the acoustic and visual privacy that our colleagues need. But these rooms are designed to so that they can expand, they can be reduced, they can move very quickly. Effectively, they can be hacked. So really designed so that they can be very flexible, and as I say, within a matter of hours, grow, shrink, or actually been taken down. And that really gives us that flexibility about how we use our space and how our colleagues need to use that space. But we've also been very mindful about, you know, this is something we've particularly piloted in our London office, but then how we can create those standards so they can be used around the world. So how are the specifications standard can be cut around the world and really enable that scalability rather than something which is unique to one office and great for that office, but actually doesn't have the scalability needed.
Yeah, great example, Adam. Thank you. Thank you all. That was a really inspiring discussion, but I'm afraid we need to wrap it up now. Although I could go on for much longer. But on behalf of Arup, I would like to thank the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for their collaboration and partnership to develop the Circular Buildings Toolkit. I would like to extend my personal thanks to all of our panelists for joining us here today and their contributions to what has been a really inspiring discussion. And we've heard from a wide range of stakeholders in the property industry about the tremendous appetite for change. And I would like to personally encourage you all to go and check out the toolkit, find out ways to make it your own, so that we can move forward on our collective journey towards circular economy and a more sustainable planet. Thank you all.